the line that I drew from here and the door where they intersect, if I hover my cursor over it, I see another glyph. This time the glyph is shaped like an X, like an intersection. And all I have to do is click with my left mouse button and I've drawn a line precisely from the intersection of those two lines. Here's another intersection. When I hover over that intersection, I see the X, the green little X glyph, and I'm able to draw a line precisely to that intersection. It even works on arcs. Like for instance here, I have the arc of the ellipse of the soaking tub here, and the line that I drew to the drain, and I can snap to that intersection. So wherever entities intersect, I can snap precisely to those intersections. All right? All right. Now, I'm going to go over this in more detail later, but I want you to notice something. Autodesk turns on, in the default template, they turn on this Object Snap extension. So you'll see this turned on by default in a lot of default drawings. What is the extension snap? Well, this one is a little conceptual in a sense. Let me show you how this works. Basically, with the extension turned on, when you're in the middle of a command and you hover over, but don't click, if you hover over one of your snaps, like for instance, I'm hovering over an endpoint snap. If I move my mouse away from that spot, it's hard to see on my screen. You might be able to see it on yours if you try this. There's a little green plus sign left behind. Now these all have funny names, like I've been calling the little symbols a glyph, but this one is called a blip. And what it does is, if you move your mouse in alignment with that blip, you'll see sort of a extension of your cursor from that point. You see what I'm saying here? Now notice I don't have my ortho turned on. Okay? But what's going on here is that I can draw a line precisely horizontal when it's in alignment with that blip. So if I pick a point right now, you see how that line was perfectly straight, and yet I didn't have any object snaps on. So that's what the extension. So you might see, and I pointed out because I think it confuses people new to AutoCAD when they see these little sort of things extending from their cursor, these little sort of things. But I have something coming up later that really is pronounced with the little extensions. Here's another thing I want to make note of. When you have an object snap like center, like for instance, I have these circles representing the knobs of the faucet. There's no geometry there for me to click on. So basically what I'm getting at is this. If I hover my, well, see, I can't get in there. All right. So here I am, I'm hovering over the center, but there's nothing to hover over. As you can see, the way I did this is I zoomed in. You might see it now, but then if I zoom in, it sort of disappears. What I'm getting at is that some object snaps, there's not any real geometry to click on. I don't have anything to click on or activate the glyph for the object snap center. So if I hover over the geometry over here, you can see in the center of the circle now, there is the green glyph. And notice where my cursor is, it says center. My point here is this. If I want to draw a line to the center of this circle, I can click right where my cursor is right now. As long as I see that green glyph, it will draw a line precisely to the center of that circle when I see that green object snap. So I'm going to click right now. You see where my cursor is? I'm going to click right now and look where the line draws to. See how the line went to the center. Another example of this is, how about this ellipse? Notice there's a white plus sign in the center of the ellipse. Now that's there because I momentarily hovered over the ellipse of the top. Let me zoom out. And when I zoom, it disappears. I'm going to zoom out just a touch. All right. My point is, I can't click on anything in there. I can't see the center of the ellipse. But if I hover my cursor over the ellipse, you can see the glyph there. But if I move my cursor away from the geometry of the ellipse, notice how the plus sign is still there. What this allows me to do with that little blip is now I can hover over that bit of geometry. So I don't have to click here, which I can, but I don't have to. Now that I have the little blip in the middle, I can click right on the blip. These are very subtle little behaviors of this that I just want you to be aware of, and you'll get the hang of it as you go along. All right. Now, there is a object step that I would recommend, I use quite often, I would recommend you turn on. They don't have it turned on by default. I tend to use midpoint a lot. And I think a lot of other users do too. If you want this constantly running, go ahead and click on midpoint here. Now there's a little check mark there. Okay. Now try to add some geometry using the midpoint snap. I'm going to start a line. And when I hover over the midpoint of geometry, look at this, I get a triangle. That is the glyph for midpoint. And I can draw a line from the midpoint here, to the midpoint here, to the midpoint here. The thing I want you to notice about this is the magnetism. Even though my cursor is way down the line here, I still see, when I hover over the geometry, I still see the midpoint glyph. And what that means is, even if I click where my cursor is right now, the line is still going to be drawn to the midpoint. Similarly with like endpoint. Here, my cursor is hovering over a line, and yet the endpoint snap is showing. I do not have to move my cursor all the way to the end of the line to snap to the endpoint. It's like a magnet. If I click right here, it's going to, well, it's going to be a straight line. That's not a good example. Here, let me try. How about this one? No, that's the midpoint. Oh, how about over here? Yeah, these are endpoints. Look at this. If I hover over, that's the mid, there we go. Well, you get, this is a good example too. Look, as I move my cursor along this geometry, one will magnetize the closer I get to the midpoint, or it will magnetize closer to the endpoint. But my whole point in showing you this is that I don't have to hover my cursor over the exact endpoint in order for it to snap to it. As long as I see that glyph, all I have to do is click where I'm at, and the line will be drawn to the endpoint. Okay? All right. Now, I want to show you the drafting setting dialog box for this. So if you would, go to that list again. The little arrow next to the object snap button. And at the very bottom of the menu, there's an object snap settings selection. Go ahead and click on that. Object snap settings. This is that same dialog box we were in when we were looking at grid. Just on the object snap tab. Here you're seeing a similar setting that we saw in the pop-up list. We saw here all of our object snap modes. Now, it's a best practice to have a minimal amount of running snaps. Even though you see there's a button here to select all, it's generally not recommended that you have them all on, because then your cursor is not going to know what to snap to. It's going to have so many options, and it's just going to make things even less efficient. You think it might be more efficient if you have all these on, but it becomes less efficient. It's like the law of diminishing returns. The more and more I put here, the less and less efficiency I'm getting out of it. Especially with a object snap like nearest. What nearest does is no matter what entity or object your cursor is next to, it's going to magnetize nearest. Wherever your cursor is, the nearest point it's going to snap to. So here, just to show you this, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And then I'll start a line command. And by the way, you don't see any of these object snaps unless you start a drawing command. Okay? All right, so I'm going to start the line command. And here, notice that no matter where I go, I see a glyph when I hover over something. That's the nearest. So wherever my cursor is nearest to, it's always going to be on. So that's, in order for me to find something like the midpoint, I have to sort of search around for it. There, now that's endpoint. Here, I'll look for midpoint here. And you can see how difficult, there's the midpoint. But you see how difficult it is with all of them on. Now, you could think that maybe what I'll do is I'll just turn off nearest, maybe. But still, you're going to have a lot of selections. It's going to be too many. So, as a recommendation, go back to your object snap dialog box. I'm going to clear them all. Just have at most 4 or 5 running at a time. And the ones that I like to turn on are the endpoint, midpoint, center, and intersection. Now, just so you can kind of get used to it, and because a lot of drawings typically have extension turned on by default, I'm going to go ahead and let you turn that one on too. I do have something a little bit later on in the course where we actually utilize this. All right, go ahead and hit OK. So here, after me giving you that whole speech about just having 4 or 5, what happens if you want to draw a line? Let's say I want to draw a line. I'm in the middle of this walk-in closet. And I need to draw a line from the end point of this door for whatever reason. And I want the line to be, that might be a little bit too on the nose. I want it to be perpendicular. How about this? Let me pick something else. That might be a little bit too on the nose. Let's say I want to draw a line from the midpoint of this arc. And I want that line that I draw for the midpoint of this arc to be perpendicular to this line right here. Okay? So here's what I don't want you to do. Watch this. I don't want you to have to come over here, start the line command, pick the midpoint of the arc, and then say, oh, I need to get to the perpendicular here. This is what I don't need you to do. I don't need you to come over here, turn on the running snap perpendicular, and then come over back over here, and there's the perpendicular, like so. All right, I don't want you to do it that way. Because now you have perpendicular running, and that's just an added snap to add to the confusion. So what do? I'm going to turn that off. Well, what you can do is you can apply what's known as a snap override. All right? A snap override. Watch me first, and then you're going to try it. I'm going to actually pick maybe a midpoint here, so it's a little less obvious here. I'm going to pick the midpoint of this line here instead of the arc. Anyway, watch me first. This is how you apply a snap override. If I start the line command, for instance, and I pick the midpoint of this line, and I want the line to be perpendicular to this line, okay? What I do is I press my shift key, and I hold down the shift key. Then I right-click my right mouse button. A menu appears. This is the snap override menu. I do not need to keep my finger on the shift key after the menu appears, so I can let go of my shift key. And now what I can do is I can pick from any one of the snaps in this list, and it will override whatever it is that I have set as my running snaps. So I can come over, it's like I can temporarily make perpendicular the current running snap. And when it's overriding, what that means is no other object snap will appear. Now I can get this one very easily, but before I click there, look at this. No matter what I hover over, the only thing that's going to appear are the perpendicular object snaps. There is no other snap that appears because it's overriding the running snaps that I have. The only thing that appears is perpendicular. So I can do what I was saying. I can click on perpendicular, but as soon as I do that, I'm back to my running snaps. No longer do I have perpendicular running. So what this allows me to do, it allows me to temporarily make one of my object snaps, the current snap, the overriding snap, and then I can maintain my list as is. I don't have to add anything to the list just to use that object snap. All right, now that you watched me, we'll do it together. I'm going to undo what I've done here. All right, so start the line command. Pick the midpoint of this line here in the walk-in closet. And now to get to that object snap override menu, you have to press your shift key, right-click your right-click mouse button, then you can let go of your shift key. The menu stays up, and you can select any of the object snaps as an override. We're going to use perpendicular in this case. Select perpendicular, and then hover over the geometry. And I want you to also just get a feel for it. Hover over other, don't click, but just hover over other geometry and see that the only glyph that appears is the perpendicular snap. By the way, if I'm hovering over something way over here, the perpendicular snap is going to appear over here. Okay, so if you hover over something and say, hey, I don't see it, well, that's because this is not perpendicular, but the perpendicular snap is way over here. I also want you to learn that behavior. All right, now once you've seen that, you can go ahead and click on your geometry and you can draw a line precisely perpendicular to that line. All right. Here, you want to try some other object snaps? How about quadrant? I've got a mess here. Oh, how about this bathroom for quadrant? There's a bathroom down here. A quadrant will snap to the sides of the circle, the four quadrants of the circle, 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, and 270. So if you start a line, for instance, and let's say I wanted to draw a line from this quadrant here, so I can hold down my shift key, right click, let go of my shift key, and I can select quadrant. And then when I hover over a circle, look at that, a diamond appears. And now I can start a line from that quadrant. Maybe I want to go around to all the quadrants. Well, then I have to write, this is a little practice for you. Shift, right click, quadrant. Shift, right click, let go of the shift key, quadrant. Shift, right click, quadrant. Shift, right click, quadrant. Now you could have just used endpoint, I know, but we're practicing. All right. Now you saw that there is a snap for centers of circles, the center. Well, what if, or arcs, center of arcs and center of circles, and center of ellipses and things like that. But what if the shape you have is not a circle and you want to snap to the center of that object? For instance, this toilet tank here. What if I wanted to start a line from the center of this geometry? Well, we have an object snap for that. It's called geometric center. Try it. Start the line command. We'll use it as an object snap. Shift, right click, let go of your shift key. I'm talking about this guy right here, geometric center. And if you hover over that square, look at that. There's a geometric center glyph that appears. It looks like the circle one, but it's a little bit more bold. And it has, instead of a little plus sign cross, it has, or blip, I should say. Instead of a little plus sign blip, it has a plus sign and a cross, an X, as the blip. See that? And you can either click on it on the little blip, or you can click on the geometry itself. But there you see, you can draw right from the center. Okay? Now imagine you did not have the center, geometric center snap. Here's what you would have to do. You would have to draw a line from the midpoint here to the midpoint here. And then draw a line from the midpoint here and the midpoint here. And then you can draw a line from the intersection or the midpoint. You know, I should have just used midpoint, but you get the idea. But I could have just drawn one line now that I think about it. But here's the point. I have a geometric center that I can just use one click and I'm done. Oh, I clicked quadrant. I clicked quadrant by mistake. Let me try it again. Shift, right click, geometric center. There we go. All right, hopefully you're playing around with a lot of these overrides and looking at how all of them sort of behave. Any questions about any of them? All right. All right, that's pretty much what I wanted you to be able to see here, just practicing with that. I don't have any thing to actually draw, but now that you know how to use that, that will help you draw with accuracy, with precision. All right. Here's the next thing I want to take a look at. Drawing with precision. So that was drawing with precision using object steps or using existing objects. So the last in our series of drawing with precision is going to involve something called polar tracking. All right, for this, here's what I'd like everybody to do. Close this class file for plotting and viewing. Don't save it. Don't save it. Just close it. Don't save it. When it says save, say no. And we'll open up our residential drawing for this to practice in. So find and open up your residential drawing. Looks like mine isn't anywhere on this list, so I have to go back to open. So you can go to open here, however you want to do it, open. In your class files folder, go ahead and select your residential drawing and go ahead and hit open. All right. Now, I remember having a lot of geometry left over in here, and I don't know what happened. I think maybe I don't remember how we got rid of the geometry that we were practicing with. But that's okay. I don't need it there. I was going to erase it anyway. But if you happen to have any geometry, do this for me. In your residential drawing, if you start the erase command, and here it is right here, it's going to ask you to select objects. Don't go through and try to select all the objects individually. And I have a whole thing about object selection coming up. Just type in the word all, A-L-L, and hit enter. And if it finds anything, hit enter again, and it'll erase everything in your drawing. But we'll do that again later if you need to, but because we're going to add some more practice geometry in here. So if you already have geometry in there and it didn't erase, don't worry about it. We're just going to practice with this, and you can just sort of zoom off to the side somewhere. All right, I have my A wall layer as the current layer. I'll keep that as the current layer. And what I want everybody to do is turn on their ortho again. Turn on your ortho drafting aid. So as you know, when you have your ortho drafting aid turned on and you draw, if I start my line command, for instance, my rubber band is restricted to horizontal and vertical angles. That's the only thing I can draw. And that's fine. You know, sometimes I want to draw something that is very precise like this. Okay? But of course, there's going to be a need to draw at other angles, right? Well, one thing we could do, but I'm not going to have you do this. One thing we could do is we could use the method I showed earlier. We could use the relative polar coordinates. So for instance, let's say I wanted to draw a line at 45 degrees. So what I could do is, at this point, I could add my @ sign. Then I could enter in a distance, let's say 15 feet. And then I could enter in an angle by using the angle symbol. And I could put in here an angle of 45 degrees. There, I've just drawn something at a different angle than horizontal and vertical. But that's me using that relative polar method that I showed you earlier. But the whole point of this exercise is to show you we don't need to do that. I have something easier for us to use. Here, I'll do it one more time with the relative. You see what I have to go through? I have to type in at sign, put in the distance that I want, maybe 10 feet, and then I have to put in the angle symbol from my keyboard, which is, I've been avoiding this because I always forget. I think it's the greater than symbol or the less than symbol. Oh, I always forget. But anyway, either one, the one that looks like this. And then, oh, something happened where I hit the wrong button. Let me try it again here. At 15 feet. Oh, I'm still in it. Never mind. At an angle. Something's up. Let me try again. I don't know what I did wrong here. Let me try it again. So if I draw a line, and I'll draw it from here, and I want to draw it at a 45-degree angle, I put the at sign at, let's say 15 feet again, at an angle, there we go, 45. All right. And look how much difficulty I had trying to type all of that in. Well, that's my point. We don't need to do that. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to use a drafting aid called polar tracking. Polar tracking. Now, polar tracking is similar to ortho. In fact, on your status bar, they're right next to each other. Here's the ortho, and to the right of the ortho command, you have the polar tracking command. Now, these two drafting aids are mutually exclusive. And what that means is they can't both be on at the same time. You either have to have one on or the other. So if you click on polar tracking, watch what happens to ortho. It automatically turns off, and vice versa. If you click back on ortho, polar tracking turns off. Now they can both be turned off, but they can't both be turned on at the same time. And so I like to make the analogy like a superhero. They have an alter ego, right? So think of it this way. Ortho is like Clark Kent, but when Clark Kent is in the room, the Superman can't be in the room. So Clark Kent has to leave the room in order for Superman to come into the room. But they can't be in the room at the same time. Clark Kent and Superman can't be in the same room. So that's mutually exclusive. Now, they both can be out of the room. They can both be out of the room, but they can't both be in the room at the same time. So that's your polar tracking that we're going to take a look at. Now, the way that this particular polar tracking is set right now, there's a little arrow right next to it, just like the arrow we saw for object snaps. Go ahead and click on that little arrow, and you're going to see all the angle intervals that can be accessed. Now, the one that I have set here right now is 90 degrees, or 180 degrees, or 270 degrees, or 360 degrees. Well, that's the same exact angles as ortho. Let's keep it there for just a second because I want to show you something. If you start a command like the line command again, and I'm going to pan over here. Now that I have ortho, look what happens. If I click a point to start a line, I can freely move my mouse and the rubber band wherever I want. But where are the 0, 90, 180, 270, 360? Where are those degrees? Well, this is what happens. As soon as my cursor gets into alignment with one of those intervals, like 0 degrees, a green dashed line vector, I call it the laser beam. A green dashed vector shoots out of the end of my cursor. When I see that, that means I can click with my left mouse button and create that geometry at precisely that angle, in this case, 0 degrees. So it's kind of like the ortho. I'm going to go ahead and click. But now I can freely move my cursor around at other angles. But when I need that precise vertical or horizontal, I move my mouse until I see that laser beam. And by the way, if you zoom out, that laser beam just goes on and on and on forever. But if I need a vertical or horizontal line, I just move my mouse to that angle, and as soon as I see that laser beam, I can click my left mouse button. But what's convenient about this is that I can move my mouse. I'm not restricted like the ortho restricts me. I'm not restricted to those 90-degree angles. So when I need it, I can just apply it, just like that. Now, what if I wanted other angles other than 90 degrees? Well, that's what we do over here. We set another set of intervals. If you set this to 45, then every 45-degree interval will appear. And that includes 0 degrees, 45. And 45 degrees from 45 is 90 degrees. And 45 degrees from 90 degrees is 135 degrees. And 45 degrees from 135 degrees is 180 degrees. So the point I'm trying to make is that, yes, it includes the horizontal and vertical angles, but it adds the 45 degrees to the intervals. Try it. Go ahead and click on 45. Start your line command. And now you'll see the laser beam appears at every 45-degree angle. Just kind of move your mouse around to get a feel for that laser beam before you add a line. See how it appears wherever you move at a 45-degree angle. So you can still draw vertical and horizontal, but now you have 45 degrees that you can draw at. Okay? Here, try this with me just to get a feel for this. Start the line command. Pick a point, and I want you to move your cursor so that you see the laser beam shooting out at 0 degrees. I want you to type in 10 feet. For the foot mark, it's the apostrophe. So 10 feet. I want you to hit enter. Now, move your mouse until you see the 45-degree angle. And you see the 45, you see the laser beam shooting out at 45 degrees. I want you to again type in the distance of 10 foot. So what are we doing here? We're using direct distance entry. Not with the ortho, we're using it with the polar tracking, but we can do other angles other than 90 degrees. Here, do it again. Go straight up. Make sure you see 90 degrees. Type in 10 feet again. Point it until you see the angle of 135. Type in 10 feet again. We're going to make a stop sign, an octagon. Try it again. Make sure the cursor and the laser beam is shooting out at 180 degrees. Type in 10 feet. Hit enter. Now point your cursor. How about this? I'll use the compass headings for you. Point your cursor to the southwest until you see that laser beam. Type in 10 feet. Point your cursor due south. Type in 10 feet. Point your cursor southeast. Type in 10 feet. All right, you should have a complete circuit around there. Little stop sign. All right. Try another interval. How about every 30 degrees? Here, try it again, but this time maybe make it 5 feet. Look at this. Start your command line, and I have 30 degrees set. And I'll do the same thing. I'll start a line, and I'll start at 0, and I'm going to go 5 feet. Then I'm going to move it until it says 30 degrees, and I see my laser beam, and again, 5 feet. Then I'm going to move it until I see it say 60 degrees, and I'm going to type in 5 feet. Then I'm going to do it until I see the next laser beam, which is 90 degrees. Then I'm going to type in 5 feet and hit enter. Then I'm going to move it towards the northwest until I see the first laser beam. In this case, it's 120 degrees. And I'm going to type in 5 feet. Okay, you get the idea. But this is just practice, just so you can get a feel for how this works. All right, the next one is 150 degrees, 5 feet. All right, the next one is going to be 180 degrees, 5 feet. The next one, sort of pointing down to the southwest again, this is 210 degrees, 5 feet. Once again, how about this? This is 240 degrees. And we're just adding in 30 degrees. What was the last one? 210. Now this one is 240, 5 feet. The next one, I believe, is, 270. That's another 30 degrees from where I was, right? 240, and now I'm going 270. That's 5 feet. All right, now heading back to the southeast here. 300 degrees, 5 feet. And then finally, I think this is going to be my last one, 330 degrees, 5 feet. And you can see how I've connected the dots there. All right, this drafting aid also has a dialog box. So look at this. If you go to the menu, there's a tracking settings dialog box in the drafting settings. Let's take a look at it. Remember, you can, however you access this, you can use any one of those. You just kind of click on the particular tab here, and it'll get you. But this one, what we're looking at is polar tracking. All right. Now, here you see the standard list that you see in the list down here. But let's say there is an angle that you'd like to use, but it's not in this list. Let's say I want to have an angle at every 25 degrees instead of 30. So I can click here, additional angles, and I can make a new angle. So let's say I have some weird room that the walls are all at 25 degrees. So I can add 25 there. If I hit OK, now take a look at your list at the very bottom, and look how it's sort of separated from the standard ones. You can add your own custom angles. All right? All right, so if I have 25 feet, let's see what kind of shape I get this time. Now I still have zero. Zero's still in it. Zero, I'll go 5 feet. Then I'll move it until it says, look at that, 25 degrees, 5 feet. Then I'll move it until it says 50 degrees, every 25 degrees. This is going to be 5 feet. I'll move it until the rate should be, that's 75 degrees. I'll say 5 feet, and so on and so on. I think you get the idea here. Oh, look, 90 degrees is not part of that interval. You see that? So it skipped right over 90 degrees to go to 100 degrees, right? 10 degrees past 90, 5 feet. The next interval is 125. So we're going in 25-degree intervals. 5 feet, 125, 150, 175, 200. No. Yeah, 200. Yep, 200. 225, 250, 275, 300, 325, and look at this. 360 degrees. I came up a couple degrees short. So if I draw another line from here, this is 350 instead of 360, 10 degrees short. All right, see that? Anyway, that is using polar tracking. All right, any questions about polar tracking? Well, we have an exercise. We're going to use polar tracking to create a symbol for our doors. So here is our bedroom plan, and we're going to have a symbol here that represents doors. And the door panel is going to go off at an angle of 45 degrees with a little arc that's going to represent the swing. All right. So here's how I want us to do this. We're going to start a fresh, brand new drawing, and we're going to save it as door. Same as the window, we're not going to worry about layers. We're not going to worry about units. We're not going to worry about limits. We're just going to start to draw. And just like our window, we're going to start our door at the hinge point, and the hinge point is going to be at the absolute coordinate of 0, 0. All right, so let's start a brand new drawing. I'm just going to click the little plus sign right next to my drawing tab. All right. Now, same as before, and try not to zoom. Try not to roll the wheel, because I don't want to get in that situation where you you're zoomed out too far and the geometry you're drawing is negligible. But just like we did before, I would like you to hold down the wheel and pan, holding the wheel down so that it's a little bit, the origin is a little bit away from that lower left-hand corner. Just make things, it'll make things a little bit easier on us. Here's another thing, and I didn't do this the last time, but I'm going to do it now when we did our window. I'm going to do it now when we're doing our door. Oh, I forgot to save. Let's save our drawing. All right, so click Save, and let's call this Door. All right, go ahead and hit Save. All right, so what I was about to say is I didn't do this the last time, but I want to turn off the visibility of the user coordinate system icon. I don't want it distracting you. To do that, go to your View tab. And here is the visual setting for the UCS icon. Notice it's blue, that means it's on, so you can turn it off. Just to kind of give you a feel for this, look at this. Every drawing starts, I don't know why, but maybe it's this drawing setting or something in the template. But every drawing starts with the view cube on and the navigation toolbar on. That's fine, we can keep them on, it's fine. I just want to show you that that's why these are blue. But if you click on them, look how they disappear. If you want all three of them to come back, what do? You just click on them. See how they turn blue? That's the thing I've been saying. Even these buttons down here, when they're turned on, they're blue. Okay, so now you can really see that. I'm going to just turn off everything here. Another thing is you'll notice that the grid is still on. And I don't know if I pointed this out or not, but the origin is denoted by axes that are red for X and green for Y. You see the green grid line? It's not really a grid line, but it is a line representing where that origin is. So in a sense, we don't even need the UCS icon because where those green and red references meet, that's the origin. That's 0, 0. All right, and just like the grid, they won't print. And I think if you turn off the grid, the green and red lines also disappear. Yep, they're just part of the grid. Here, I'll turn them back on. All right, looking at our exercise here, our door, we're going to draw a line starting from 0, 0. And our door is going to have this panel that goes off at a 45-degree angle at 2'6". Now, our drawing is not architectural. Our drawing is set to decimal units. So we're not going to use 2'6". We're going to use 30. 30 units. 30 units is going to equal in our architectural drawing 30 inches. And 30 inches is 2'6". For this one, it says 1 3/4 of an inch. We're not going to use that. We're going to use 1.75 because our drawing is decimal. And then we're going to draw that little line going off at an angle relative to 45 degrees. And then once again, we're going to come around. So we're drawing the same shape. We're drawing a rectangle, but this time we're drawing it at a 45-degree angle. All right, so I'll get you started here. Start the line command. So you got to go back to the Home tab. Start the line command. It's asking you to specify a point. I want you to specify the absolute coordinate of 0, comma, 0. Just type it in just like I said, 0 and a comma and a 0, and then hit enter. Now you're seeing your rubber band. All right? Oh, crap. I just realized something. I left it on 25 degrees. So notice that this is not a system setting. I'm sorry. It's not a drawing setting. It's a system setting, meaning that I changed it to 25 degrees in the other drawing, but I start a new drawing, and it sort of remembered that. So it's part of the system. So I'm going to come down here. I forgot to change this. I'm going to change my polar tracking angle to 45 degrees. I forgot to change that. All right, so come down here and change this to 45 degrees. Now, before you draw anything, I just want you to kind of, it's still stuck on 25. I might have to start over. Now, you know what is going on is that I've added an additional angle here. So let's stop this. I'm sorry. Go ahead and hit enter on your keyboard, or let's see what enter does. Or just hit right click. Everybody do this. I'm so sorry. Right click and click cancel here. We need to go back to the tracking settings. Here's the reason why. Go back to tracking settings. This is a very subtle sort of thing here, but we can add 25 to the list, but it will also add it as an additional angle to whatever increment angle we have. So if I turn it off here, let me just see if that does it. I'm going to actually delete it afterwards, but I want to show you. If I have this additional angles turned on here, it will add 25 to my 45 degree interval. But if I uncheck that, let me just check and see here. Yeah, now I don't see 25. So even though I have this set to 45 degrees, watch this. If I add an additional angle to my increment here, now, I have to start again here. No, apparently I'm off. I don't know why, but somehow or another it just remembered 25 the last time. Say, here, we'll do this. Sorry. We'll do this to make sure that we don't have any issue. Go back to your tracking settings. Highlight make sure the check mark additional angles is checked. Select 25 and delete it. And that'll make sure that we don't have it. Just delete that from the list. All right, sorry about that little hiccup. All right, so I'm going to start again. I'm going to start the line command again. I'm going to come down here to make sure, double check that I only have 45 degrees set. All right. Then I'm going to specify the first point as 0, 0, and hit enter. All right. Now move your cursor to the so that the rubber band is pointing towards the northeast, and then you'll eventually see the laser beam, the polar tracking vector. Once you see that polar tracking vector, you can let go of your mouse, and I want you to type in the distance, the direct distance of 30, and hit enter. 30. All right. Now, you might need, like me, you might need to pan or zoom out just a bit so you can see the full line. All right. And make sure, like I was showing before, make sure you're not this far zoomed out. If you're way zoomed out, then you can't really see what you're doing. So make sure you're zoomed in enough so that you can see the full extent of the line. All right, now we're going to define the line that represents the thickness of the door panel, which is 1.75. I need you to move your mouse until the laser beam points to the southeast. All right, 315 degrees. With the laser beam pointing to the southeast, you type in 1.75. That's going to eventually be 1 3/4 of an inch in our architectural drawing. But here in our decimal units, it is 1.75. All right, go ahead and enter in that distance and hit enter. All right, now you're going to go back the other direction. You're going to point your cursor, your laser beam, to the southwest. Once you see that laser beam, you can type in 30 and hit enter. By the way, just like the ortho, notice where my cursor is. It does not have to be all the way down here. It just needs to point in that direction. All right, now you could cheat here and you could use your close option, but in the interest of the practice of this method, point your cursor, get your laser beam to point to the northwest, and type in again 1.75. Now you can hit enter again to exit out of the command. All right. So here you'll see you've got your door panel at that exact distance of 30 units and the exact thickness of 1.75 units, and all of these lines are in 45-degree intervals. To finish this off, we need to draw a little arc. I thought I had, no, never mind. Do I have two separate drawings? Sorry, I'm getting a little, yeah, okay, I'm fine. We're going to finish this off by drawing this little arc here. Now, the way I want you to draw this little arc is we're going to use the option set arc tool that will allow us to specify the center of the arc, which is going to be 0, 0. Then we're going to be asked for the start point of our arc, and we're going to have our little rubber band and our laser beam shoot out at 0 degrees, and we're going to type in a direct distance of 30 units. And then we're going to end our arc, the end point of the arc, and we're going to end it at this top corner. Okay? All right, so start over here. That option set I just described to you was center, start, end. So you can use this one right here, center, start, end. All right, go ahead and start that one. Now, for the center part of the arc, specify the center point of the arc. You're going to type in the absolute coordinate, 0, 0, and hit enter. There's your rubber band. Notice the rubber band is not a solid line because you're not drawing a line, you're drawing an arc. This is just representing the radius of the arc. All right? I want you to move your mouse down 0 degrees due east until you see the laser beam. Once you see the laser beam, you're going to type in a distance to specify the start of your arc, and that's going to be 30 units. So type in 30. Notice where it's placing it. It's placing it here in the text box here. 30 and hit enter. Now you can see your arc beginning here. Notice the direction of the arc. What is the direction of the arc? The arc is going in counterclockwise because that's how our angles are set up. 0 degrees, 45 degrees, 90 degrees, 135 in a counterclockwise direction. That's what we had set up, or that's, I should say it this way. That's what's set up by default in the default template. All right, for the endpoint of the arc, you can move your mouse until you see the 45-degree laser beam, which is basically going to end it right here at the endpoint here. So you can either click on the endpoint here, or you can just click when you see the laser beam. So notice where my cursor is. I can see there's my preview of my arc, but if I use the laser beam, the polar tracking, and just click, I've created the arc. Now, don't worry about this little bit of overlay. You're not going to be able to see that if you print. And basically, that's just the way the geometry is. It's just, you know, we can't get it to this thing here. We'd have to figure out a different angle for the arc and a different radius for the arc because it's not, this is exactly 30 inches. From the center, we'd have to figure out a different center. And it's just too much. So we're just going to keep it like this. All right, save your drawing. And you can go ahead and close your door drawing. And so now that concludes our series of drawing with precision using coordinates. Notice that we use absolute coordinates various times during these exercises. Mostly 0, 0, of course. Drawing with precision using the object snaps, using the existing geometry, and drawing with precision using polar tracking, not instead of, I don't want to say instead of, but in addition to ortho. You can use ortho for some situations and you can use polar tracking for others. And it just depends on, you know, what you're trying to do and what you feel more comfortable with. All right, we're going to take our break just a tiny bit early. When we come back, now I'll be getting into those selection methods. So far I've been tiptoeing around it, but now we'll dive right into it now that the topic is officially introduced in the workbook. All right, any questions before we break? All right then, like I said, it's going to be a couple minutes early. So when the timer runs out, you have like a couple extra minutes until we start. All right, so I'll see you at 1 o'clock.